Greetings and welcome back once again. That's my favorite thing, right? Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Emunah Yisrael, Solonomics 101 LEV project. I hope everybody is having a great, awesome day. Look down at the time. I'm like, wow, the 20th of December. 11 more days in the month. A few more installments of the last book of the year, Olaudah Equiano. I tell y'all after this, I'm going to take a real serious break. Just to process all of it. I want to thank everybody who's tuning in. This is the LEV project, and again, you know, so much to say. But let's get in this narrative. We'll say all that stuff to say later. This is the chapter. What's this? 9? Chapter 9, section 5. Olaudah Equiano. Our next voyage was to the Mediterranean. By the way, he's free now. He got his freedom. He bought it. He left the island of Montserrat, I believe, and now he's trying to go back to England. Then he was like, yo, they're not paying him enough money, so he decided to go back on the sea. Our next voyage was to the Mediterranean. The ship was again got ready, and we sailed in September to Genoa. This was one of the finest cities I ever saw. Some of the edifices were of beautiful marble and made of most notable appearance, and many had very curious fountains before them. The churches were rich and magnificent and curiously adorned both in the inside and out. But all this grandeur was, in my eyes, disgraced by the galley slaves whose condition, both there and other parts of Italy, is truly piteous and wretched. After we had stayed there some weeks, during which we bought many different things we wanted and got them very cheap, we sailed to Naples, a charming city and remarkably clean. The bay is most beautiful I ever saw. The moles from ships are excellent, and I thought it extraordinary to see grand operas acted here on Sunday nights and even attended by their majesties. I too, like these great ones, went to those sights vainly, served God in the day while I served Mammon effectually at night. Well, he's being honest with himself, right? He's indulgent in the European culture. He's assimilated, and this is what he's identified with over the years of his captivity. While we remained here, there happened an eruption on Mount Vesuvius, of which I had a perfect view. It was extremely awful, and we were so near that the ashes from it used to be thick on our deck. After we had transacted our business at Naples, we sailed with a fair wind once more from Smyrna and arrived there in December. A Shiraskier or officer took a liking to me here and wanted me to stay, offering me 2 wives. It's funny. I was just gonna say I haven't heard him speak about any, no children or anything. So now he goes from none to 2, right? But I refused the temptation, thinking one was much as some could challenge. Sorry, but I refused the temptation, thinking one was as much as some could manage, and more than others would venture on. The merchants here travel in caravans or large companies. I have seen many caravans from India with some hundreds of camels laden with different goods. The people of these caravans are quite brown. Among other articles, they brought with them great quantity of locusts, which are kind of a pulse, sweet and pleasant to the palate, and in shape resemble French beans but longer. Each kind of goods is sold in a street by itself, and I always found the Turks very honest in their dealings. They left no Christians into their mosque. They let no Christians in their mosque or churches, for which I was very sorry, being fond of going to see the different modes of worship of people wherever I went. The plague broke out while we were in Smyrna, and we stopped taking goods into the ship till it was over. She was then richly laden, and we sailed in March of 1770 for England. One day on our passage, we met with an accident which was near burning the ship. A black cook in melting some fat. One second. A black cook, in melting some fat, overset the pan into the fire under the deck, which immediately began to blaze, and the flame went up very high under the foretop. With the fright, the poor cook became almost white and altogether speechless. Happily, however, we got the fire out without doing much mischief. After various delays in this passage, we arrived in Sandgate Creek in July, and at the latter end of the year, some new event occurred, so that my noble captain, the ship, and I all separated. In April 1771, I shipped myself as a steward with Captain William Robertson of ship Grenada Planter once more to try my fortune in the West Indies. Oh, he went back again? And we sailed from London to Madeira, Barbados, and Grenadines. When we were at this place having some goods to sell, I met once more with my former kind of West India customers. Give me 1 second. As soon as I start reading, they start doing baby business. I met once more with a former kind of Miss India customers. A white man, an islander, bought some goods of me to the amount of some pounds and made me many fair promises as usual, but without any intention of paying. He had likewise bought goods from me from some more of our people whom he intended to serve in the same manner, but still he amused us with promises. However, when our ship was loaded and near sailing, this honest buyer discovered no intention or sign of paying for anything he had bought of us. But on the contrary, when I asked him for my money, he threatened me and another black man he had bought goods of, so that we found we were like to get more blows than payment. On this, we went to complain to one Mr. McIntosh, an injustice of a justice of the peace, and we told his worship of the man's villainous tricks and begged that we would be kind enough to see us redressed. But being Negroes, although free, we could not get any remedy, and our ship being then just upon the point of sailing, we knew not how to help ourselves, though we thought it hard to lose our property in this manner. Luckily for us, however, this man was also indebted to 3 white sailors who would not get a farthing from him. They therefore readily joined us, and we all went together to search him. When we found where he was, I took him out of the house and threatened him with vengeance, on which, finding he was likely to be handled roughly, the rogue offered each of us some small allowance, but nothing near our demands. This exasperated us much more, and some were for cutting his ears off, but he begged hard for mercy, which was at last granted him. After we had entirely stripped him, we then let him go, for which he thanked us, glad to get off so easy, and ran into the bushes after having wished us a good voyage. When we then repaired on board, and shortly after set. So I'm turn Batman now. Set sail for England. Section 6. I cannot help remarking here a very narrow escape we had from being blown up owing to a piece of negligence of mine. Just as our ship was under sail, I went down under the cabin to do some business and had a lighted candle in my hand, which in my hurry without thinking I held in a barrel of gunpowder. I remained in the powder until it was nearly catching fire, when fortunately I observed it and snatched it out in time, and providentially no harm happened. But I was so overcome with terror that I immediately fainted at this deliverance. In 28 days' time, we arrived in England, and I got clear of the ship, but being still on a roving disposition and desirous of seeing as many different places of the world as I could, I shipped myself soon after in the same year at Stewart on board of a fine large ship called the Jamaica, Captain David Watt, and we sailed for England in December 1771, for Nevis and Jamaica. I found Jamaica to be a very fine large island, well peopled, and most considerable of the West Indian islands. There was a vast number of Negroes here, whom I found, as usual, exceedingly imposed upon by white people, and the slaves punished as in the other islands. There are Negroes whose business is to flog slaves. They got about to different peoples for employment, and the usual pay is for 1 to 4 bits. I saw many cruel punishments inflicted on slaves in a short period of time I stayed here. In particular, I was present when a poor fellow was tied up and kept hanging by the wrist at some distance from the ground, and then some 1/2 weights were fixed to his ankles, in which posture he was flogged most unmercifully. There were also, as I heard, 2 different masters noted for cruelty on the island, and who had staked up 2 Negroes naked, and in 2 hours the vermin stung them to death. I heard gentlemen whom I knew tell me, my captain, that he passed sentence on a Negro man to be burnt alive for attempting to poison an overseer. I pass over numerous instances in order to relieve the reader by a milder scene of roguery. Before I had been long on the island, when Mr. Smith at Port Morant bought goods of me to the amount of 25 pounds sterling, but when I demanded payment from him, he was each time going to beat me and threatened to put me in a gaol. One time he would say I was going to set his house on fire. At another, he would swear I was going to run away his slaves. I was astonished at this usage from a person who was in the situation of a gentleman, but I had no alternative and was therefore obliged to submit. When I came to Kingston, I was surprised to see the number of Africans who were assembled together on Sundays, particularly a large, commodious place called Spring Bath. Here, each different nation of Africa meets and dances after the manner of their own country. This is interesting. I have to find my pen so that I can, because I said I've been doing a lot of reading on what happened in America, and the Caribbean is very interesting that he's speaking of Caribbean, namely Jamaica, and highlighting that he says, when I came to Kingston, I was surprised to see the number of Africans who were assembled together on Sundays, particularly at large commodious place called Spring Bath. Here, each different nation of Africa. I've said this many times that it was different nations. We know that, but then we still say, why can't we come together when it was never that way? And dance after the manner of their own country. They still remain most of their native custom, or retain most of their native customs. They buried their dead and put victuals, pipes, and tobacco and other things in the grave with the corpse in the same manner as in Africa. Our ship having got her laden, we sailed for London, where we arrived in August following. On my return to London, I waited on my old and good master, Dr. Irvin, who made me an offer of his service. Again, being now tired of the sea, I gladly accepted it. I was very happy in living with this gentleman once more, during which time we were daily employed in reducing old Neptune's dominion by purifying the briny element and making it fresh. So he was into water desalination. Thus, I went on till May of 1773, when I was roused by the sound of fame to seek new adventures and find towards the North Pole. He's bugged out. What our Creator never intended we should, a passage to India. An expedition was fitting out to explore northeast passages conducted by Honorable Constantine John Phibbs, since Lord, who this is? Mulgrave, in his Majesty's sloop of war, the Racehorse. Section 7, Chapter 9. My master being anxious for the repetition of this adventure, we therefore prepared everything for our voyage, and I attended him on the board Racehorse the 24th day of May, 1773. We proceeded to Sheerness, where we were joined by His Majesty's sloop for the Carcass, commanded by Captain Ludwig. On the 4th of June, we sailed towards our destined place, the Pole, and on the 15th of the same month, we were off to Shetland. On this day, I had a great and unexpected deliverance from an accident which was near blowing up the ship and destroying the crew, and which made me ever after during the voyage uncommonly cautious. The ship was so filled that was very little room for anyone on board, which placed me in an awkward situation. I had resolved to keep a journal of the singular interesting voyage, and I had no other place for this purpose but a little cabin or the doctor's storeroom where I slept. This little place was stuffed with all manner of combustibles, particularly with tow and aquafortis, and many other dangerous things. Unfortunately, it happened in the evening as I was writing my journal that I occasioned to take the candle out of the lantern, and a spark have touched a single thread of the tow. All the rest caught the flame, and immediately the whole was in blaze. I beheld nothing but present death before me, and expected to be the first to perish in the flames. In a moment, the alarm was spread, and many people who were near ran to assist in putting out the fire. All this time I was in the very midst of flames. My shirt and the handkerchief of my neck were burnt, and I was almost smothered with smoke. But through God's mercy, as I was nearly giving up all hopes, some people threw blankets and mattresses, threw them on flames, but which means, in short, the fire was put out. I was severely reprimanded and menaced by such of the officers as knew it, and strictly charged never more to go there with a light. And indeed, my fears made me give heed to this command for a little time, but at last, not being able to write my journal in any other part of the ship, I was tempted again to venture, but stealth with a light in the same cabin, though not without considerable fear and dread of my mind. On the 20th of June, we began to use Dr. Irvin's apparatus for making salt water fresh. I used to attend the distillery I frequently purified from 26 to 40 gallons a day. The water was distilled. The water was thus distilled, was perfectly pure. 1 second, please. So he's into distilling seawater. The water was thus distilled. The water was thus distilled. Sorry, the water thus distilled was perfectly pure, well tasted and free from salt, and was used on various occasions on the board the ship. On the 20th of June, being in latitude 78 degrees, we made Greenland, where I was surprised to see the sun did not set. The weather now became extremely cold, and we sailed between north and east, which was our course. We saw many very high and curious mountains of ice, and also a great number of very large whales, which used to come close to our ship and blow the water up to a very high, great height in the air. One morning we had vast quantities of seahorses about the ship, which nigh exactly like any other horses. We fired some harpoon guns amongst them in order to take some, but we could not get any. Welcome to those who have just joined us. We're reading Olaudah Equiano. Give me one moment. The baby is turned like up on level 10 today. I have to keep going on pause to see what in the world is going on with her. She's like dee 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 dee. Like I'm okay. I can't concentrate up in here. And then here comes the train. 1 second. Okay. It goes on to say, we are in the, if you want to follow along, the link is in the box. Like I said, we're on the tail end of this year-long LEV project. I will continue with memes and short, conversations, but for the most part, I'm gonna do some quiet reading going forward. Yeah, we're on chapter 9, section 8, no, section 7. So let's continue. He says, on the 30th, the captain of Greenland's ship, he's on his way now to the North Pole, which is wild. He's all over the place. He came back from the Caribbean. He learned to take salt water out of make fresh water out of salt water, and now he's going to the North Pole. On the 30th, and by the way, he was a slave, and he bought his freedom after years in servitude, but he never really suffered harsh servitude, and he learned to be a seaman, and that's what he's doing. On the 30th, the captain of Greenland's ship came on board and told us of 3 ships that were lost in the ice. However, we held on our course till July the 11th, when we were stopped by one compact, impenetrable body of ice. We ran along it from east to west about 10 degrees, and on the 27th, we got as far as 80 degrees, 37, and in the 19th or 20th degrees east longitude from London. On the 29th and the 30th of July, we saw one continued plain of smooth, unbroken ice that was 8 yards, 11 inches thick. We had generally sunshine and constant daylight, which gave cheerfulness and novelty to the whole of this striking, grand, and uncommon scene. And to heighten it still more, the reflection of the sun from the ice gave the clouds a most beautiful appearance. So he's not giving the regular narrative of that we're hearing of most slaves. We killed many different animals at this time, and among the rest, 9 bears. Though they had nothing in their paunches but water, yet they were all very fat. We used to decoy them to the ship, sometimes by burning feathers of skin. I thought them coarse eating, but some of the ship's company relished them very much. Oh, they was eating bears? Some of our people once in a boat fired at and wounded a seahorse, and which dived immediately, and in a little time after brought up with it a number of others. They all joined in an attack upon the boat, and that's what and were difficulty prevented from starving or oversetting her. But a boat from the carcass having come to assist ours and joined it, they dispersed after having wrested an oar from one of the men. One of the ship's boats had before been attacked in the same manner, but happily no harm was done. Though we wounded several of these animals, we got but one. So, the European likes, just hunting animals just for fun, or, eating strange things. Section 8. We remained hereabouts until the 1st of August, when the two ships got completely fastened in the ice, occasioned by the loose ice that set in from sea. This made our situation very dreadful and alarming, so that on the 7th day we were in a very great apprehension of having the ship squeezed to pieces. The officers held a council to know what was best to do in order to save our lives. It was determined that we should endeavor to escape by dragging our boats along the ice towards the sea. Like, why are you guys going to the North Pole? However, was further off than any of us thought. This determination filled us with extreme dejection and confounded us with despair, for we had very little prospect of escaping with life. One second. It says here, go back to your room. However, sorry, not you guys, the baby. This determination filled us with extreme dejection and confounded us with despair, for we had very little prospect of escaping with life. However, we sawed some of the ice about the ships to keep it from hurting them, and thus kept them in a kind of pond. We then began to drag the boats as well as we could towards the sea, but after 2 or 3 days' labor, we made very little progress, so that some of our hearts totally failed us, and I really began to give up myself for lost when I saw our surrounding calamities. While we were at this hard labor, I once fell into a pond we had made amongst some loose ice and was very near being drowned. Remember, he can't swim. This happened the last time when they were shipwrecked. So he has a wild life. But providentially, some people were near who gave me immediate assistance, and thereby I escaped drowning. Our deplorable condition, which kept up the constant apprehension of our perishing in the ice, brought me gradually to think of eternity in such a manner as I had never done before. I had the fears of death hourly upon me, and shuddered at the thought of meeting the grim king of terrors in the natural state I then was in, and was exceedingly doubtful of a happy eternity. If I should die in it, I had no hopes of my life being prolonged for any time, for we saw that our existence could not be long on the ice after leaving the ships, which were not out of sight and some miles from the boats. Our appearance now became truly lamentable. Pale dejection seized every countenance. Many who had been before blasphemers in this our distress began to call upon the good God of heaven for his help. This is very interesting. And in the time of our utter need, he heard us, and against hope or human probability, he delivered us! Exclamation point. It was the 11th day of the ships being thus fastened, and the 4th of our drawing the boat in this manner, and the wind changed to east-northeast. The weather immediately became mild, and the ice broke towards the sea, which was to the southwest of us. Many of us in this got on board again, and with all our might we hove the ships into every open water we could find, and made all the sail of them in our power. And now, having a prospect of success, we made signals for the boats and the remainder of the people. This seemed to us like a reprieve from death, and happy was the man who could first get on board of any ship or the first boat he could meet. He proceeded in this manner till we got into open water again, which was accomplished in about 30 hours, to our indefinite joy. Like, does he have a clock? Like, he be knowing time, date, calendar, everything, and he out there open water. We proceeded in this manner till we got into open water again, which we accomplished in about 30 hours, to our infinite joy and gladness of heart. As soon as we were out of danger, we came to anchor and refitted. And on the 19th of August, we sailed from this uninhabitable extremity of the world, where the inhospitable climate afforded neither food nor shelter, and not a tree or shrub of any kind grows amongst the barren rocks, but where all is one desolate and expanded waste of ice, which even the constant beams of the sun for 6 months in the year cannot penetrate or dissolve. The sun now being on the decline, the days shortened as we sailed towards southward on the 28th. So he must have been, yeah, it's summertime. I was just talking to my daughter about the seasons in, the Arctic. So it's summertime, so it doesn't get, that's why he says it, the sun doesn't set. They have like, what is it, 6 months of daylight. And so I guess, this is summer, so the ice is breaking up a little bit. The sun now being on the decline, the days shortened as we sailed on the southward, and on the 28th in latitude 73, It was dark by 10 o'clock at night. September the 10th, in latitude 59, we met a very severe gale of wind and high seas and shipped a great deal of water into the space of 10 hours. This made us labor exceedingly hard at all our pumps a whole day, and one sea which struck the ship with more force than anything I ever met with the kind before, laid her under water for some time, so that we thought she should have gone down. 2 boats were washed from the booms, and the longboat from the chucks, and all our movable things on the decks were also washed away, among which were many curious things of different kinds which we had brought from Greenland. And in order to lighten the ship, we were obliged to toss some of our guns overboard. We saw a ship at the same time in a very great distress, and her mast gone. But we were unable to assist her. We now lost sight of the carcass till the 26th, when we saw land about a forwardness of which place she joined. From thence we sailed for London, and on the 30th came up to Deptford, and thus ended our Arctic voyage, to no small joy of all on board, after having been absent 4 months, in which time, at the imminent hazards of our lives, we explored nearly as far as the pole as 81 degrees north and 20 degrees east longitude, being much further, by all accounts, than any navigator had ever ventured before, in which we fully provided the impracticability of finding a passage that way to India. That's the end of chapter 9. We're going to venture, as again, I'm trying to hold my pace here. So if you would like to read, as always, you're welcome to say so, and I can give you the link. If not, I will continue to read. We are now on chapter 10. What's up, Tish? Yes, Tish, 1 year strong. We're reading from, you lost your place. We're reading on chapter 10. We're on chapter 10. If you're following along with the link, I'm looking out the book. So we're following along with the link. We're on chapter 10, and it's actually, how many chapters? I think it's 12 chapters in the book. So we got 2 more chapters. It's 12 chapters in the book. So we have 2 more chapters to go. It's probably going to be, if I go today, tomorrow, and Thursday, most high willing, when we'll be done for the year. You got it? We're going to rock out now. So, when March comes around, people crying, oh, we only get 1 year. No, you only give yourself one month out of the year. We continue to wait around for someone to give us something where we have the ability, and we have demonstrated it. And shout out to all who have supported the LEV project throughout this year. I can't believe the year is done already, but, do the work. It ain't gonna come easy. We have to break these cliches. We have to, come up out of these thought processes that, we just read one little thing. See, it's the Willie Lynch letter. Come on now, man. It's so much more. We gotta give our foreparents a little more respect than that. If you sum their whole existence up and you silence their voice, and you give all credence to the Willie Lynch letter, come on now. Give them a little bit of more respect than that. Read the words they left on record. Learn the lessons that they, pull something, be able to quote something outside of it's the Willie Lynch letter. Please, come on, please, please, help us out here. Chapter 10. I just had to share that because okay, I'll say this. Over this year, I've grown so much. Sister Tish is here. And at first, Tish didn't even want to be down with it, because it's so much pain. But once you move your way through it, you're like, wow, there's so much. You can read Thursday after 5. All right, Tish, I would love for you to come through and read Thursday after 5. I would love voices. I'm probably going to put out a flyer and call everybody who would like to read. Lift up our voices. That's what the LEV project is. Lift every voice, the LEV project. And, I've just been, I have the vision for it. So, sometimes you just got to go in the trenches and do the work, you know what I mean? And so I benefited greatly. And those who have participated have expressed that they have benefited. So, it's all worth it. It's all worth it. Chapter 10. The author leaves Dr. Irvin and engages on a board of Turkey ship, account of a black man being kidnapped on board. Shalom, Sister Angel. That's another Sister Tisha, Sister Angel, riding from the very, very beginning. Yeah, I know it's funny, but I love it because and you and Sister Angel, it's a transformative testimony. When I actually started, I'm like, read, heal, and grow. This is what, when you look at January 1, you go back and look, that's what I put on the flyer. Heal, read, and grow. And we have two sisters in the house from the beginning that their testimony is greater than anything I could tell you. So I think I really, if you guys could come on Friday, on the finale, not Friday, on Thursday, hopefully, and we do a finale, I would like for you guys to share your own testimony, not just on the text, but with your own voices, and let the people know the power of, like, who would have known that, Olaudah was never really enslaved. Like, oh, you just saying that because you sticking up for the white man. This is his own words. This is his own words. The man traveled around the world. And even though he was enslaved, he never met with hard slavery. He witnessed it. And later on, he's going to be active within the abolitionist movement. The Zong massacre, I believe I spoke about that before. Look that up. They're saying there's the movie called Bell. Another Left Project supporter hit me to the movie Bell. So when you watch the movie Bell, you will see that it was dealing with the Zong massacre out of Jamaica. And that Olaudah, to my understanding, he had something to do now when he goes back to England with the abolitionist movement. So let's continue. So hopefully, Sister Tish, Sister Angel, and whoever else can, nothing but growth. Yeah, I would love to hear you guys' voices on this finale of this LEV project, finishing up this year strong. And anyone else who's been following along from, a good couple of months now, we would love to hear your voices. I know I've been talking enough. Y'all might be tired of hearing me right now. Get tired of hearing Emunah, so it's good to hear somebody else. Chapter 10. Our voyage in the North Pole being ended, I returned to London with Dr. Irving, with whom I continued for some time, during which I began seriously to reflect on the dangers I had escaped, particularly those of my last voyage, which made a lasting impression on my mind, and by the grace of God, proved afterwards a mercy to me. It caused me to reflect deeply on my eternal state. Oh, now he got near-death experience. Now he want to straighten up. And to seek the LORD with full purpose of heart, ere it was too late. I rejoiced greatly and heartily thanked the LORD for directing me to London, where I was determined to work out my own salvation, and in so doing procure a title to heaven. This being the result of mine, blinded by ignorance and sin. In the process of time, I left my master, Dr. Irving, the purifier of waters. I lodged in Coventry Court, Haymarket, where I was continually oppressed and much concerned about the salvation of my soul, and was determined in my own strength to be a first-rate Christian. I used every means for this purpose, and not being able to find any person amongst those whom I was then acquainted with, which acquiesced with me in a point of religion or in script language, and that would show me any good, I was much dejected and knew not where to seek relief. However, I first frequented the neighboring churches, St. James and others, 2 or 3 times a day for many weeks. Still, I came away dissatisfied. Something was wanting, and I could not obtain. And I really found more heartfelt relief in reading my Bible at home. This is wild. So he says, and I really found more heartfelt relief in reading my Bible at home than attending the church. And being resolved to be saved, I purposed other methods. So he's trying to go to church. He's like, nah, I ain't feeling this. I'd rather read at home. First, I went along among the people called Quakers, whose meeting at times was held in silence, and I remained as much in the dark as ever. I then searched into the Roman Catholic principles, but was not in the least edified. I at length had recourse to the Jews, which availed me nothing, as the fear of eternity daily harassed my mind, and I knew not where to seek shelter from the wrath to come. Section 2, chapter 10. However, this was my conclusion at all events, to read the 4 evangelists, and whatever sect or party I found adhering thereto, such I would join. Thus I went on heavily without any guide to direct me the way that leadeth to eternal life. I asked different people questions about the manner of going to heaven, and was told different ways. Here I was much staggered, and could not find any at the time more righteous than myself. Oh, I can't. He said, he couldn't find nobody more righteous than him, or indeed so much inclined to devotion. I thought we should not all be saved. This is agreeable to the scriptures, nor would all be damned. I found nothing among the circle of my acquaintance that kept holy the 10 Commandments. So righteous was I in my own eyes that I was convinced I excelled many of them in that point by keeping 8 out of 10, and finding those who in general term themselves Christians not so honest nor so good in their morals as the Turks. I really thought the Turks were in a safer way of salvation than my neighbors. So that between hopes and fear I went on. And the chief comforts I enjoyed were in the musical French horn, which I then practiced, and also dressing of hair. He was a barber. Such was my situation some months, experienced the dishonesty of many people here. I determined at last to set out for Turkey, and there to the end my days. It was now early in the spring of 1774. I sought for a master and found a Captain John Hughes, commander of a ship called the Angelica, fitting out the river of Thames and bound to Smyrna in Turkey. I shipped myself with him a steward. At the same time, I recommended to him a very clever black man, John Annis, as a cook. This was on board the ship nearly 2 months during his duty. He had formerly lived many years with Mr. William Kirkpatrick, a gentleman on the island of St. Kitts, from whom he parted by consent, though he afterwards tried many schemes to inveigle the poor man. He had applied to many captains who traded to St. Kitts to trepan him, and when all the attempts and schemes of kidnap proved abortive, Mr. Kirkpatrick came to our ship at Union Stairs on Easter Monday, April the 4th, with 2 wherry boats and 6 men. Having learned that the man was on board and tied, forcibly took him away from the ship, and in presence of the crew and the chief mate, who had detained him after he had information to come away. I believe this was a combined piece of business, but that as it may, it certainly reflected great disgrace on the mate and captain also, who, although they had desired the oppressed man to stay on board, yet notwithstanding this vile act on the man who had served him, he did not in the least assist to recover him, or pay me a farthing of his wages, which was about £5. I proved the only friend he had who attempted to regain his liberty, if possible, having known the want of liberty myself. I sent as soon as I could to Gravesend and got knowledge of the ship in which he was, but unluckily she had sailed the first tide after he was put on board. So they captured the dude and took him, trying to take him back to St. Kitts, I imagine. So, but unluckily, my intention was then immediately to apprehend Mr. Kirkpatrick, who was about setting off for Scotland, and having obtained a habeas corpus for him and got a tipstaff to go with me to St. Paul's churchyard, where he lived, he, suspecting something of this kind, set a watch to look out. My being known to them obliged me to use the following deception. I whitened my face and that they might not know me, and this had the desired effect. He did not go out of his house that night, and next morning I contrived a well-plotted stratagem, notwithstanding he had a gentleman in his house to personate him. My direction to the tipstaff had the desired effect. He got admission into the house and conducted him to the judge, according to the writ. When he came there, his plea was that he had not the body in custody of which he was admitted to bail. I proceeded immediately to well-known philanthropist Brave Sharp Esquire, who received me with utmost kindness and gave me every instruction that was needful of the occasion. I left him in full hope that I should gain the unhappy man his liberty, with the warmest sense of gratitude towards Mr. Sharp for his kindness. But alas, my attorney proved unfaithful. He took my money, lost me many months' employ, and did not the least good in the cause. Like, how many times did he get jacked up by Europeans and he still, gives them the benefit of the doubt? He says, but alas, he lost my money, month's employment. When the poor man arrived at St. Kitts, he was, according to custom, staked to the ground with 4 pins through a cord, 2 on his wrists and 2 on his ankles, was cut and flogged most unmercifully, and afterwards loaded cruelly with irons about his neck. I had 2 very moving letters from him while he was in this situation, and I made attempts to go after him at a great hazard, but was sadly disappointed. I also was told of it by some very respectable families now in London who saw him in St. Kitts in the same state, in which he remained till kind death released him out of the hands of his tyrants. He still ain't learned, sis. He keep doing it every time. Like, they stole his freedom, and every time he gives them the benefit because they got him young. And so this Stockholm syndrome, this traumatic bonding, he put his fate more in the hands of the Europeans. And throughout the narrative, you never really see him relate to his brothers or sisters or those who look like him. He would call them poor wretches or them or those. But the Europeans, he felt this affinity towards them from a very early age. So yeah, he still ain't learned, basically. Section 3, 1 second. All right. Section 3. During this disagreeable business, everything is they rob his money, they don't pay him, they threaten to beat him up. The other man in Georgia, Savannah, tried to kill him, and he's still giving them the benefit of the doubt. So when we say what's wrong with our people, we have to understand it runs deep. During this disagreeable business, I was under strong convictions of sin and thought that my state was worse than any man's. My mind was unaccountably disturbed. He often wished for death, though at the same time convinced that I was altogether unprepared for the awful summons. Suffering much by villains in the late cause and being much concerned about the state of my soul, these things, but particularly the latter, brought me very low, so that I became a burden to myself and viewed all things around me as emptiness and vanity, which could give no satisfaction to a troubled conscience. I was again determined to go to Turkey and resolved at that time never more to return to England. I engaged as a steward on board a Turkey man, the Western Hill Captain Lena, but was prevented by means of my late captain, Mr. Hughes, and others. All this appeared to be against me, and the one comfort I then experienced was in reading the Holy Scriptures, where I saw that there is nothing new under the sun, Ecclesiastes. The book of Ecclesiastes, what did he have here? 1:9. And what was appointed for me, I must submit to. Thus I continued to travel in much heaviness and frequently murmured against the Almighty. Wow, he's ODing now. Particularly in his providential dealings, and awful to think I began to blaspheme and wished often to be anything but a human being. And what I will say here is that his fate and those that are enslaved are kind of the same, in that even though he escaped, he's still not connected with any of his family, no brothers and sisters, and no support system. And so that's kind of like the people who make it rich and make it out the hood, but still they're lonely on the other side, because the struggle was with yours who you know, but when you make it out, the struggle is yours by yourself. And so this is kind of what he's experiencing on the other side of freedom. In these severe conflicts, the Lord answered me by awful visions of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men and slumbering upon the bed. Job 33:15. He was pleased in much mercy to give me to see, in some measure, understand the great and awful scene of the judgment day, that no unclean person, no unholy thing can enter into the kingdom. He's quoting Ephesians 5:5. I would then, if I had been possible, have changed my nature with the meanest worm of the earth, and was ready to say the mountains and rocks to fall on him, not going to see me. Revelation 6:16, but all in vain. I then in the great agony requested the divine creator that he would grant him a small piece of time to repent of all his follies, vile iniquities, which I felt to be grievous. The Lord in this manifold mercies was pleasant to grant my requests, and being yet in a state of time, the sense of God's mercies was so great on my mind when I awoke, that my strength entirely failed me for many minutes, and I was exceedingly weak. This was the first spiritual mercy I ever was sensible of, and being on praying ground, as soon as I recovered a little strength and got out of bed and dressed myself, I invoked heaven from my innermost soul and fervently begged that God would never again permit me to blaspheme his holy name. The Lord, who was long, this is why they say when you're in pain or when you're suffering, just close your mouth, because you might open up your mouth and say some wild stuff that, that afterwards you want to try to take back. He says here, he begged. And the Lord, who was long suffering and full of compassion to such poor rebels as we are, condescended to hear, I felt that I was altogether unholy and saw clearly what a bad use I had made of the faculties I was endowed with. I like that little phrase, bad use of the faculties that we are endowed with. They were given me to glorify God with. I thought, therefore, I had better want them here and entered into life eternal than abuse them and be cast into hellfire, he says. I prayed to be directed if there were any holier people, persons than those with whom I was acquainted, that the LORD would point them out to me. I appealed to the shearers, the searchers of hearts, whether I did not wish to love him more and serve him better. Notwithstanding all this, the reader may easily discern, if a believer, that I was still in nature's darkness. At length, I hated the house in which I lodged, because God's most holy name was blasphemed in it. Then I saw the word of God verified, vis-a, before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. I had a great desire to read the Bible for the whole day at home, but not having a convenient place for retirement, I left the house in the day rather than stay amongst the wicked ones. That day, as I was walking, it pleased God to direct me to a house where there was an old seafaring man who experienced much of the love of God shed abroad in his heart. He began to discourse with me, and as I desired to love the LORD, his conversation rejoiced me greatly. And indeed, I had never heard before the love, he says, of Christ to believers set forth in such a manner, and in so clear a point of view. Here I had more questions to put to the man than his time would permit him to answer. And in that memorable hour, there came in a dissenting minister. He joined our discourse and asked me some few questions, among others, where I heard the gospel preached. I knew not what he meant by, quote, hearing the gospel, end quote. I told him I had read the gospel, and he asked me where I went to church, or whether I went at all or not. To which I replied, I attended St. James, St. Martin, St. Anne, Soho's. So said he, you're a church man. I answered, I was. He then invited me to a love feast at his chapel, at his chapel that evening. I accepted the offer and thanked him, and soon after he went away. I had some further discourse with the old Christian, added to some profitable reading, which made me exceedingly happy. When I left him, he reminded me of coming to the feast. I assured him I would be there. Thus we parted, and I weighed over heavily conversation that had passed between those two men, which cheered me, or my then heavy and drooping spirit, more than anything I had met with for many months. However, I thought the time long in going to my supposed banquet. I also wished much for the company of these friendly men. Their company pleased me much, and I thought the gentlemen were very kind in asking me, a stranger, to a feast. You better be careful. But how singular did it appear to me to have it in a chapel. When the wished for hour came, I went, and happily the old man was there, who kindly seated me, as he belonged to the place. I was much astonished to see the place filled with people, and no signs of eating and drinking. There were many ministers in the company. At last they began to giving out hymns, and between the singing, the minister engaged in prayer. In short, I knew not what to make of the sight, having never seen anything of the kind in my life before now. Some of the guests began to speak their experience agreeably to what I read in the scripture. Most was said by every speaker of the providence of God and his unspeakable mercies to each of them. This I knew in a great measure, and could most heartily join them. But when they spoke of a future state, they seemed to be altogether certain of their calling and election of God, and that no one could ever separate them from the love of Christ or pluck them out of his hands. This filled me with utter consternation, intermingled with admiration. I was so amazed as to know what to drink. Oh, sorry, I'm bugging out. I'm thinking feast. I'm changing words. I was so amazed as not to know what to think of the company. My heart was attracted, and my affections were enlarged. I wished to be as happy as they, and was persuaded in my mind that they were different from the world that lieth in wickedness. Love feast. Yeah, he's like, you said this was a feast with a food. He's like, what's this? You singing hymns? He says, 1 John verse 19, their language and singing, etc., did well harmonize. I was entirely overcome and wished to live and die thus. Lastly, some persons produced some neat baskets full of buns. Oh, here come the food. Hope it's not hot cross pagan buns, which they distributed among each person, communicated with his neighbor and sipped water out of the different mugs, which they handed out about to all who were present. Yo, he said they gave him buns. Are they over there taking communion? The kind of Christian fellowship I'd never seen, nor ever thought of seeing on earth. It fully reminded me of what I read in the Holy Scripture of the primitive Christians who loved each other and break bread and partaking of it, even from house to house. This entertainment, which lasted about 4 hours, ended in singing and praying. It was the first soul feast I was ever present at. Soul feast, okay. These last 24 hours produced me things spiritual and temporal, sleeping and waking, judgment and mercy, that I could not but admire the goodness of God in directing the blind, blasphemous sinner in the path that he knew not of. Even among the just, instead of judgment, he had showed mercy, and will hear and answer the prayers and supplication of every returning prodigal. Oh, to grace, how great a debtor daily I constrain to be. We up to section 4. So I'm gonna pause it here. Most I willing, we'll be back tomorrow. And then we will finish up this chapter, and then we'll only have 2 chapters to go. So tomorrow I'll probably go through. I gotta save my voice, right? Yeah, we're gonna go through the next chapter. We're gonna finish up this one. I'm gonna put my little bookmarker here, and we're gonna finish up this one. I think this is interesting that, you know, people, he's traveled the world. He born in Africa. You know, again, for those who just joined us, we're reading Olaudah Equiano, the life of Olaudah Equiano or Gustavus Vassa, in his own words. He's born in Africa. He's an Igbo, by the way. That's what we read in the beginning of the book. He was kidnapped as a young boy. He has this strange affinity to his kidnapper, you know, classic syndrome. And he never had hard servitude. He traveled the world. He changed from master to master. He bought his freedom. And after all of that, he sees emptiness in his soul. Sounds good. Give your voice a break, right, sis? I know, right? I'm just trying to finish it out. You know, if you could come through tomorrow, that would be a beautiful thing. You know, the purpose was for everybody to chip in. But I know how it is. You know what I'm saying? They might be like, Emunah next year. I'll be like, Emunah's on break. But, you know, this is just very interesting. If we can learn anything from him, there comes a time where we want, our soul becomes hungry. And once we satisfy the will of the flesh, and it doesn't suffice, then after they use their strength, after we, the people, use our strength on vanity, and when we're all dried and consumed, then we want to go search out the Creator. Then we want that space to fulfill us. And I believe there's a proverb that speaks of seek the Most High when you're yet young. If it's not a proverb, it's a psalm. Like, why waste your strength when you're a youth on foolishness and folly, and then when you're old and crusty, like, oh, Most High, I'm ready now. You understand what I'm saying? And so this is what he's going through at this point, which is just very interesting. But once again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Sister Tish and everyone who's listening, you know, let me know if you can tune in tomorrow around the same time, so we could just go ahead and work through this book. And you know, link me on social media, Emunah Yisrael on Facebook, on what's the next thing? Instagram. And we'll still be doing the LEV project, but kind of like in a meme kind of way. And dropping some quotes from some books that we have read over this year. So with that said, I pray everybody have a blessed day, a blessed night, and see you tomorrow. Peace.